Hello and Happy New Year. Welcome to the program People, Politics and Power. This is the first edition for the year. We're happy to have you safely back from the holidays. I am Imonia Marire. So much has happened in the year 2021 that will inform and shape events in 2022. In turn, 2022 will have a huge impact on 2023, Nigeria's next general election year. 2022 is an electioneering year. It will be a defining year for the 2023 elections in many ways. It is the year the political parties will be holding their conventions and conducting their primaries to pick candidates for the various elective offices in 2023. What this means is that there will be an elevated level of politicking amidst the various security and economic challenges facing the country. How is this likely to play out? Given the rather chaotic and rancorous character of the various political parties, particularly the major or big ones. Your guess is as good as anyone's as to how the political environment will be impacted moving forward. On the program today, we shall kickstart discussions around the projections and expectations for 2022. There will be two off-season governorship elections in Ekiti and Osun states. The conduct of these elections will most likely point the direction for the 2023 polls. What will be the effect of the delay in assenting to the amended Electoral Act on the governorship polls and the conduct of party primaries? What color will the various agitations in the country take this year? With the official declaration and gazetting of bandits as terrorists bring any meaningful differences? Or is it a case of too little, too late? The Buhari administration has just barely 17 months to go. What legacy will it be leaving behind? Will it be bequeathing a more united, a more equitable and democratic system, or a fractured country and political system? Join us as we explore these issues and more on the program this Friday. We shall meet our guests right after this time out. All right, thank you so much for staying with us. Let's get to meet our guest analysts who are in the studio with us. First, let's meet Senator Abubakar Uruma Gada, a member of the 6th Nigerian Senate. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. You're welcome.
Also with us today is a familiar face, Dr. Hussein Abdul. Dr. Abdul is a political scientist and the country director, CARE. Thank you so much and Happy New Year.
Thank you for having me. Happy New Year.
Distinguished Senator, Happy New Year.
Same to you. Happy New Year.
Good to see you again.
Well done, well done.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, let's begin this way. If you were to reflect on 2021, what would you say stood out for you?
As a politician, I'll go straight to my political party. 2021 witnessed APC conducting successful Congress registration exercise to expand the base in terms of membership. 2021 witnessed successful world congresses, local government congresses, and the state congresses. These are major feats in a political party, and these are determining parameters on which every other thing in terms of politicking will be built upon. So for a political party to successfully achieve these feats with minimum frictions and rancor, to say the least, is a major and a formidable achievement. So I look at these achievements as taking place in preparation for the 2022 and thereafter, as you rightly pointed out in your introduction. A good 2021 will certainly make life easy for the two critical years for political parties and democratic practice in Nigeria. And so with that, I think we have already set the ball rolling, sensitizing, energizing, and reawakening political class under the effective supervision of the watchdogs, the media, and the general public. This is a major achievement.
Now, of course, 2022 is going to be a very busy year for all politicians and all the political parties. But looking at the political class as a whole, do you think that they have been able to ram up some measure or cohesion that will make 2022 what we expect it to be?
Throughout human history, power struggle is not an easy task. With due respect, we have a political scientist around. And political elites are naturally competitive in their tendencies. And having two major political parties that has created that enabling environment, it's up to political parties to put their system in order so as to woo and consolidate whatever gains and achievement they have, particularly in my party, and APC. We are continually recording major improvements in terms of membership capacity, base expansion, political elites coming in troops, in mass, because of the belief they have expressed, and then the confidence that is clearly shown in their quest for membership of the party. So 2022 should be a year where political class will be warming up to showcase themselves through their platforms and attract Nigerians, particularly the electorate, to go their way so that their vision, dreams of what will be a better Nigeria can be realized.
Dr. Abdul, given your vantage position as a political scientist and as a social activist, what would you say stood out for you in 2021?
Well, I think two major issues. One is the COVID pandemic, and second is the escalating trends of insecurity, particularly in the northwest part of the country. I mentioned these two because of their significant impact on the economy and the society. COVID is a global phenomenon, and we know how that has impacted on world trade and the implication of that for a Nigeria that is largely import dependent and that whose major source of income seems to be on mono product, and that has impacted significantly on Nigerian economy. We've seen the escalating inflation, the increasing unemployment, and that can be very devastating for the society and even the politics that we're discussing. The second is the COVID pandemic. The insecurity in the country, but we have seen much more escalation in recent time in the northwest of the country. The state of Katsina, Kaduna, Zamfara, and Sokoto have been one of the major victims of that crisis, and the impact on the economy of that region. It's a very important food-producing bed of the country, particularly by smallholder farmers and women. And when they are not able to go to their farm, when they are not able to trade, it affects their income, and it also impacts on food security in the country. And today we are under a major threat of food security crisis because of this situation. the poverty of the people in this region has also deepened. Of course, happens to be one of the poorest regions of the country as well. And so this will have a very serious implications on the politics, on the economy and all that. So these two are quite remarkable incidences that we are still grappling with.
Senator, let me come back to you. I'm tempted to push the political angle more, but I want to quickly go to the security that he has talked about now. Is there a likelihood that we could see some solution to the insecurity in various parts of the country in 2022, against the backdrop of the fact that now bandits have now been declared terrorists, and the government says it is going to deal with them as it has been dealing with other terrorists in the past, and the fact that 2022 being an electioneering year, as you know, we know in Nigeria, electioneers seem to promote a lot more violence than at ordinary times.
Yeah, of course, just like you yourself have said, what we are going to witness, given the fact that the bandits have been declared the enemy of the state, terrorists, and our armed forces are being increasingly being equipped to deal with the situation. And in the recent weeks, we have seen the mass and massive movement of the armed forces within these most affected states. My state, Sokoto, Zamfara, Katsina, that cycle along with the Niger state and some part of Kebbi. The armed forces are stepping up the onslaught on the terrorists, on the bandit. And we hope the success being recorded, however difficult it is, are sustained. Given the level of cooperation Mr. President is according to the other armed forces in terms of equipment and associated needs. We hope that this recorded achievement will provide further enabling environment for the political activities so that people can freely exercise their franchise to elect those that will further consolidate this achievement and further confront the enormous challenges of nation building, particularly emanating from the devastation suffered by the bandits and other insecurity elements in the country. So this is what, inshallah, we are hoping that with the encouragement given by Mr. President to armed forces, with their declared readiness to continue to put in their best for their fatherland, we hope.
Dr. Abdul, there is a school of thought that seem to believe that for over 12 years, we have as a country battled the Boko Haram terrorists and insurgents, particularly in the Northeast. And that war has remained, has continued. And logically, they now begin to insinuate that even if we operate at that same level in dealing with the bandits, it is not going to be an overnight task to eliminate them or indeed discourage them from carrying on the kind of banditry, terrorism that they have continued to carry out particularly in the Northwest.
I think it's a very absolutely correct theory. If we look at the nature of the crisis. Any crisis that actually have an international dimension is extremely difficult to locally contain. You can do your best, and in that context, you can minimize the damage, you can do a significant blow on them. You can continue to work to increase the safety and security of citizens. But because of the international dimensions, if we continue to have certain levels that you can rely on to continue to survive, and that's what we have seen with Boko Haram, which largely in nature is very ideological, found within the global realm of Islamism and terror and all that we have seen around the world, and inspired by developments in some of those regions. A similar situation you will also find with what Nigerians love to describe as bandit in the northwestern part of the country. That also has its own international character, particularly looking at the Central Sahel, that are also struggling with similar challenges, down from Mali to Burkina Faso to the regions of Niger, of Niger Republic, and now to even northern part of Benin Republic and northern part of Togo, are beginning to experience similar forms of violence and the ease in which people move across the borders. So, like a distinguished mentioned, yes, it is true there has been an increased military activities in the north western part of the country, and hopefully we may make some successes. And there have been declarations or they've been declared as terrorists. That's a different conversation itself on whether that will help or not. But to be honest, it's a difficult thing, and what many Nigerians don't actually know or don't understand is that the banditry did not start yesterday or 2021. As far back as 2010, I was involved in the research on banditry in Zamfara, for instance. And all through 2010 and 2011, we were making documentations with Clean Foundation, making documentations on the scale of the nature of violence in that region. Villages were being raided. There are violence and counter-violence between vigilante group within communities and these so-called bandits. 2010 was a period that Nigerians were much more looking at the Boko Haram insurgency. The media interest was largely on Boko Haram, and there is no other, even newspapers don't report them. The only few cases of reporting was largely on Daily Trust. And people can go back to Daily Trust of 2010 and up to 2011 from there and review, and you will see that systematic escalation of this crisis up to when it reaches this particular level. It was a total history of helplessness and hopelessness of communities across, because it didn't get to the radar of the state. The state did not react the way it's supposed to react in dealing with that, and we saw that spreading from the epicenter in Zamfara, going to Kaduna, entering part of Niger, now reaching Katsina, going to Sokoto, crossing over to Kebbi, and all that. So if we want to deal with it, we need to have some very better way, strong way of understanding the issue and responding to it. I believe that the conversation we have over, I think, is securitized. There's a more discussion on this issue from security perspective, which is true, which is very important because lives and properties are involved. Businesses are finding it very difficult to operate. Poor people are finding it difficult to go to their farms. But I also think that as a development person, it will be very important for me to also understand how we arrive at this senseless stage of killing and maiming and destructions and all that. Because so that at the time we succeed in stopping the violence and the killings, we are able to address the underlying factors that created this problem to avoid having a repeat of it. But my concern about conversation on this is that we have taken it from the strong political perspective of responding, stopping these things, and let's have peace, and then we move on. Typical of the way Nigeria handle its challenges. It's a firefighting kind of thing. We put fire, quench it, and then we never bother to know what ignited the fire so that we avoid the fire in the future. And if we check our history, all major crises that we have experienced, right from the Civil War up to today, there is none that we have put a total closure on. No closure. And I think that we need to change our approach if we need to find a sustainable peace in our society. That is very important. We need to deal with the symptom. It's very important. We need the military, we need the police, but we need to also deal with the underlying factor. It's like you having malaria and then you keep taking paracetamol and you expect to recover. You need to deal with the malaria parasite itself, where you are taking paracetamol to give you some immediate reliefs. So for me, that's the dimension that I'm not seeing. I'm not seeing that kind of conversation, whether it is from the state government or it is from the federal government, or even another agency, including the media. I'm not seeing that kind of conversation, and it's important to do that so that we can hold the government to account on these very important issues.
So, distinguished Senator, if I understand him very well, apart from the military approach that we seem to be deploying right now, there is a need for both social and political solution to these banditry or these terrorism, as it were now, and all of that. For leaders like you, political leaders like you, what do you think can be put on the table at this point in time now to begin to address the underlying factors?
You see, Mr. Amarare, my distinguished brother, Doctor, have said it all. You see, the mere fact that the insecurity in sub-Saharan Africa is internationally motivated to the extent that is mounting unbearable or crippling pressure on our defense systems across the continent. Having said that, the obligation for states, government, leaders to work tirelessly, selflessly, and indeed strategically to contain the situation cannot be overemphasized. But the reality is that we need this global community that clearly have an involvement into the dimensions to assist humanity, at least for that sake, and help in restoring the security and the dignity of our people. It is not easy. For sure, it is not easy. There's limit to which political leaders can do. Particularly, security discussions are not usually something that you will agree with me, are not to be discussed on camera. But we can say the underlying principles, the underlying factors, and then the general dimension, and then evaluation of the consequences of this deadly condition in which we find ourselves as a people. Be that as it may, political leaders' major agenda, major priorities should be doing those actions and activities that will be geared towards restorations of normalcy. Without stability, there cannot be prosperity. It is under stable condition, which is created by a peaceful, atmosphere, then other things will can be taken for granted. Political leaders, political class, and leaders by whatever name have these challenges that we have to come together and do something about. You see, I am impressed, if you permit me to make a reference to, I was watching one of the TV programs recently. I cannot recall whether it's AIT or any other. They had an interview with one Femi Falawi, a retired DIG. I am particularly impressed, I must confess, by his appreciation of the security situation of the country. Just like you can see the analytical framework provided by the intellectuals, because they go for the theoretical framework and we go for the stark reality. It is the combination of these two that will create a synergy that will ultimately take us to where we can say at least, or where we can celebrate, or at least begin to have a peace of mind that we are achieving a result. Let me say before I stopped, you see, we thank God for being resilient people. Despite all these tragedies, that is 24 hours, 24/7, beclouding us, an average African, particularly Nigerian, are still confident that there will be hope at the end of the day. That resilience should be used, should be harnessed by the political class so as not overstretch it, so that people confident and trust, difficult as it is for them to bear, is also being used to put resources together, human and material, to be able to appreciate and reward this quality of loyalty on the side of the citizenry. No leader will ever sleep under normal, decent condition when his people are being killed helplessly, mercilessly, and without any reason for that whatsoever. So 2022, and times to come is at the time that such academic and practical work undertaken by our academia, coupled with the reframing and re-strategizing or redrafting our manifesto as political parties, to be able to put it as a cardinal principle, as a major priority, which must be pursued vigorously. Recall that this APC administration, the major mantra for which President Muhammad Buhari canvassed for votes was economy, security, and anti-corruption. None of this, each one of these, stand on its own and is enough to occupy any government for the period of mandate given to it. But then, since things are interactive, they have to be taken in that manner. Otherwise, when you take one and leave the rest, the one that you ignore or you neglect will pull you down to the extent that there won't be any achievement also to be recorded, because societal life is a complete package. Every subsector must be reasonably developed and improved upon to be able to achieve that strength and collaborative realities to help policymakers to achieve what they want to achieve, and policy analysts like Doctor to give us an appraisal of what we have done and the major flaws or the major records or achievements, and indeed the inherent limitations that with which every other effort will have to be seen from that perspective.
Well, there is a general concern right now that the electioneering processes that will be taken up very soon in 2022 might just as well exacerbate the insecurity across the country. We'll talk about this when we return from the short break.
The Nigeria of our dream, the Nigeria we need, is the united, indissoluble, and cohesive Nigeria which guarantees equity, fairness, justice, and prosperity for its citizens. That is our focus on people, politics, and power. It is fresh, insightful, impactful. It's a must-watch. People, politics, and power on AIT.
All right, Dr. Abdul, I was reading a report just 2 days ago that was put out by Early Warning Project, which rated Nigeria as 8, or ranked Nigeria as number 8 in terms of mass killings amongst 162 countries of the world that were rated or ranked. And they put Nigeria behind countries like Pakistan, India, Yemen, Afghanistan, DR Congo, Guinea, and Ethiopia. Almost all countries that are facing one major crisis or the other. Now, the concern right now is that with electioneering here in 2022, and given the nature of the Nigerian political system and the Nigerian political parties and politicians, we just might be seeing an exacerbation of the violence, of the killings. If you recall very well, as of today, one state or the other, you will see the political elite pointing accusing fingers at each other. You are the one sponsoring this, you are the one sponsoring that violence, you are the one arming this group or the other. And with politics here with us now, that just might be an indication for a lot more, and that's the concern that most people are expressing.
Yeah, I think the fears and are expected. We're going into an election where, at the national level, the incumbent is not running. The same thing in some states, many incumbents will not run because they have done their second term. The dynamics of electioneering is always different under that kind of context, because there is vacancy and people are struggling to occupy that vacant space that has been created by virtue of our constitution. But again, the reality is that yes, during electioneering, we do experience certain level of political or security or insecurity escalation. But it is very different from the kind of mass killings that we experience under, whether it's banditry or it is the insurgency in the northeast of the country. The dimension historically, if you check through, since our return to democracy over 21 years ago, you do a trend analysis, you see the nature of that violence. You can experience cases of assassination, which is a very important insecurity issue in some part of the country where politicians try to eliminate themselves. You could experience thuggery amongst the supporters of each of the political parties. You could experience protest, which probably could turn to become violence. But it does not come in form of raids that we see under banditry, where you will raid 10 villages at the wee hours in the night, just put fire and kill them in their numbers and kidnapped in those numbers and all that. That dimension. So we may be experiencing another dimension, politically related dimensions of insecurity, which if we go back to our recent history, we can actually point out cases of assassinations, cases of partisan thuggeries and all those things, like the example of what you just gave about the accusation and counter-accusation in Imo, for instance, between major gladiators of the political parties. Interestingly, actually from the same political party and senators party. So the same people, the immediate past governor accusing the incumbent and the incumbent making a counter accusation. So we experience that trend.
And we're having similar accusations and counter accusations even in Zamfara right
yes,
now.
we have a similar trend in Zamfara at the moment. You occasionally have that kind of flyer in Kano, you find also that kind of flyer. Occasionally something happens and they say, okay, is this party that is organizing it and is this other party that is doing it? So you may experience that. But what I was just trying to look at is to say that the dimension will be very different from the kind of mass killings that we are experiencing in most parts of the northwest and part of the north central, like Niger, where raids are happening, or what we are seeing in the northeast, or occasionally IPOP inspired kind of violence that you also experience in the southeastern part of the country. I think I'm not saying that these other ones will die down. They may not die down. It may create a certain level of laxity because the security people will get involved with this other one and then may not give, and this will create space
and then worsen the situation.
And worsen the situation and allow this other, because you have created a space and therefore they are able to operate in a much freer manner because you are dealing with a new dimension. I think my worry about the country in terms of our response to security issues is that either lack of capacity or refusal to disaggregate our different insecurity situations. We'll be able to define them. The mistake we always make is to collapse everything together and just say insecurity. But we should be able to disaggregate them so that we can find the right response for each of the dimensions that we have defined. There are people who cluster herders, farmers, violence with banditry. They call it banditry, or kidnapping, or highway kidnapping, and all. We just put everything together. But it's good for us to be able to define them, get to know their characteristics and all that, and respond to them appropriately. But when you are dealing with a major security situation in the country, at the moment, the entire 36 states of the country have one form of security issues or the other. And you have the military involved in it, you have the police involved in it, and each of these institutions are overstretched. So if you now have another dimension of it, they will have to respond to it. And for them to respond to it, because they are overstretched, the other responses may be weakened. And that could escalate the situation. And I think that's the kind of trend that we will need to understand. Check, for instance, the impact of military response in the northwest on the response in the northeast, for instance, where we have the military doing spread everywhere, doing policing job because of the nature of the violence, where arms groups have emerged that have overpowered the police. People bandits are having AK-47, RPGs, and different kinds of military-grade weapons. You don't expect the police to respond to those kind of things. You actually have to engage the military, and there is limit to what they can do.
Distinguished Senator, as a practicing politician, I'm going to ask whether the political elite, the political class, will have this kind of reasoning and analysis behind their minds as they go into the field to campaign. Primaries are coming up, conventions are coming up, and we know that in Nigeria, these events can be as rancorous as ever. But in doing so, will they be patriotic enough to put Nigeria, the unity of Nigeria, the cohesion of Nigeria, in front of them in whatever they do?
Let me also digress a little to say that people like Dr. Abdullahi are part of our national asset, having been trained and invested in to be able to have that developed mind. Our academia, I must give it to them that they have that ability to be able to imagine a normal and abnormal situation and reduce it to theoretical and hypothetical, issues, to be able to put in place a guiding principles in the name of framework for the policy makers to look at the empirical evidence that has been established, which attention must be given. And any reasonable policymaker, in this case political class, must be guided if truly they understand the enormity of the responsibility given to them. So this academia, I mean, you can imagine a data that is up from 20 years to this moment, 2 decades of research, extensive research, going into absolute details to be able to establish the perfect correlations between what they assume as the likely reasons and then the reality on ground. And coming with this empirical data that you can access it through them, he has made a reference. So it's up to somebody like me as a politician to be able to establish that link. And one of the major achievements of this type of fora is establishing that link among the different components and constituents of the society, so that the politician know where to go and look for prescription. I mean, and then those who have conducted this credible research and put it together as a data, information that can always be recourse to in perpetuity, are always there. And then one generation after generation, this information is there. So it's a matter of updating it. I'm sure, Doctor, if given any extraordinary situation, is only needing to go back and update the data to be able to guide and bring the politician to date as to what the situation is on ground. So the historical trends through which he is being taken is enough to tell him where and how the whole thing started, and then to see at what point is he also coming in, with his own intervention. And then what also will be needed to be, that's why as you intervene, they have to go back to the drawing board and put and subject that intervention into a practical appraisal, whether actually the intervention has achieved the target. And then they will help you. So it's just like a medical doctor. As long as you do not submit yourself, for treatment, symptoms will not be established. So once you submit yourself for treatment, the medical doctor will now, for the purpose of elimination, will now have to invite the lab technicians or technologists to be able to establish by rule of elimination what is actually the ailment in the body. And it is in so doing that the doctor, you see him, you are just going to the doctor, not knowing that in the process, the PhD recipe is there, the cardiologist, the lab technician is there, the nursing staff, all these component parts are the ones that make the doctor. Without them, he cannot perform. So a politician who assumes simply because you know your community, or you just aspire to become a political office holder, is just enough. And that's why the tragedy we are facing, that we have people occupying office that are absolutely incompetent. They have no business to even be elected in the first instance, with due respect. Why? Because the society have compromised or even destroyed values. When there are values, that because a society without values is next to beast. It's like going to a normal jungle life. We are people of religion, and then we have enough of literature, conventional and otherwise, that will enable us put in perspective whatever we are to do for our society. In any case, we have comparative analysis. We have other societies that have achieved certain feat. You just made mention. You see, with all this we are witnessing, with all this tragedy of insecurity, the analysts like Dr. Abdullah are still fair enough to put Nigeria behind some other countries who are standing sovereignties, but with more challenging destructive tendency in their own lands, much more than because ours. There are certain things that you can say clearly, you can take it for free, that an average Nigeria is looking for relatively fair and safe environment. We are all our brothers' keepers. We are all one. We are all one, and we share this common, this humanity in us, in our subconsciousness. But then the leaders, our challenge is, you see, with due respect, people coming to contest for election for governors, particularly those with the executive and almost sovereign authority, which the society knows that these are not only habit, but it's next to another tragedy for such people to have the sovereign authority to determine people's future. But since we are suffering with most unfortunate, the policy of poverty, which doctor has already analyzed earlier. Somebody who is hungry and impoverished is literally has little difference who is also an animal, because basic dignity with which he must come to bear to reason and for him to now determine what options and choices, what constitute competence and otherwise, are already eliminated. So, what is the responsibility? The responsibility is between for me and you, Amare, and Dr. Abdul, to assume that our responsibility has no limit, so that where it needs to be, we knock individuals doors, and then we talk about this matter, discuss it, go to bed with it, wake up with it, and then maybe have this type of environment where people will now be, at least for once, to reflect when you see people coming to look for positions, from councillor to presidency, to be able to have some fundamental questions in your subconsciousness, whether there is any reason for such an individual or such a character to come and look for this type of responsibility. And once the society is able to be fair to themselves and then share this type of information among themselves and then see the reality and the consequences of having, because it's better sometimes, the philosopher says, it's better to have somebody with naked sword in the market, just unleashing this sword, not knowing who will be slashed in half, who will be. It's better to have that than to have a wrong leader, a wrong executive leader. Because a wrong executive is by his own tendency genocidal. If somebody will come to office and take the entire resources of a state and then commit it to personal abuse, that is worse than genocide. So it is up to the society to be able to have some basic norms and values with which only those who have that irreducible minimum tendency will now be allowed to occupy public office. This, I'm saying, was maximum sense of responsibility.
Distinguished Senator, I'm happy that you brought up this issue. This is an issue that we will devote another program to. Yes. Because, we see in Nigeria today where people get elected on the basis of a party manifesto, and as soon as they get elected, at every level, they abandon what they sold to the voters, to their constituents, and all of that. No, there's hardly any political party in power today that is implementing what is contained in the manifestos, in the programs of the parties on which platform they were elected.
The simple reason is that you cannot give what you don't have. you have a manifesto, but the driver of the manifesto is dumb and dumb. So where will the manifesto carry you? Manifesto is a mere putting together an idea of what you put into work. If you are carrying somebody, you can't give your vehicle to somebody who cannot drive and expect a safe return. It's not possible.
Dr. Abdul, just before we go, let's quickly touch on the issue of the Electoral Act. We have very limited time. The fact that we're going to have 2 off-season governorship elections in June and July this year, and the fact that up till as we speak, we do not have an amended Electoral Act. How is this likely to affect the conduct of those elections, and by implication, the party primaries and conventions?
Yeah, I actually think this is very, very unfortunate, and it's quite a big shame the country that in the last 10 years or so, we've actually been struggling to have an new Electoral Act, and it's not coming to fruition. We remember before the 2019 general elections, there have been attempts to have that act, and the president, for one reason or the other, refused to assent to that. and there was no action from the assembly, from the parliament, and then recently we also experienced this. This is a very big problem, and I remember even on this program, I did mention this before, that once you allow, and Distinguished is here, he was in the parliament and he knows what it is. Once you allow the enactment or amendment of an electoral act to get close to elections, it becomes a problem. And that's the issue, and this has been the trend of the country. We get our electoral act very close to the elections, and at the end of the day, we find it very difficult to perfect it, and it becomes a huge problem for us. And that's one of the reasons why the civil society demanded, after the 2019 elections, that we try as much as possible to get the new Electoral Act in the first year of the 9th Assembly.
But that didn't happen.
And that didn't happen. And they promised to do that. I remember we had a very big program, and one of the response was, I remember that being on the distance with the Deputy Senate President at that time, a former Deputy Senate President, he's no longer one, who said that they are working hard to ensure that we get this thing in November 2019. November 2019, November 2020
just about
came
5 or 6 months after the inauguration of the new assembly.
And now today we don't have it. And that is a huge challenge. If you have the Electoral Act much earlier, you can actually use it for the off-season elections. You learn from it if there are challenges with it, and then you roll it out fully in the general elections. That helps a lot. It's like you're using it for a mock. You pilot it, and then you use it for the general elections. We don't have that. Party primaries, one of the major parties have yet to even have it on conventions and all that. So if you don't have that act, you still have to use the old act despite all the anomalies, all the challenges that is actually in that act. So for us, the call is for the National Assembly to do everything possible as soon as they reconvene to ensure that they prioritize this Electoral Act and ensure that they passed it very quickly, or whatever action they want to take on it. I think it's for them to do it very quickly, recognizing the importance of these for the next general elections.
Okay. Distinguished Senator, this was your area, as a legislator, very quickly.
You know, I have said it all. One of the major advantages of assenting to law on time is giving time for planning. Yeah. These are things that require infrastructure. And then when the infrastructure are not in place until the 11 hours, the tendency is that you have a crisis that has no remedy. Or how? You have amended the extant laws, which infrastructure could have been already on ground. But you, by the new law, you have invalidated what you have on ground. And then what you have put in place require also a minimum level of planning to adjust those infrastructure to suit the new reality. Now, when you now have this all at 11 hours, my brother, what is it that can achieve?
Well, thank you so much, Distinguished Senator. Distinguished Senator Abubakar Umar Gada, a member of the 6th Nigerian Senate, joining us here on People, Politics and Power, and of course, Dr. Hussein Abdul, a political scientist and country director of CARE. Gentlemen, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me here.
All right. Well, that's our program for today. Please join us again when we bring you a fresh edition of the program, People, Politics and Power.